Hi guys, and welcome back to another DrAce video, and today we're going to be playing MotoGP 21, but more importantly than that, we are going to be discussing the race recap of the Grand Prix of Indonesia. Now unfortunately I don't have Indonesia on MotoGP, so I'm going to have to use a variation of tracks to sort of make up for the loss of the Grand Prix of Lombok. But we will be starting with Moto 3, moving into Moto 2, and then finishing up with the big boys in MotoGP. So starting off first with Moto 3, a very interesting race that kind of was a little bit unexpected for me. Now we've seen Ayumu Sasaki in Moto 3 previously in Qatar get to the front and start dominating the race, but when Dennis Foggia did it, he was absolutely dominant, utterly dominant. There was no chance of anyone chasing up the Italian at any point because he was just so fast. The fact that he only won by 3 seconds is pretty much a given, but at the same time I'm surprised it was only 3 seconds. I expected it to be much higher, because I do believe it even reached higher than that throughout the Grand Prix. But what an entertaining fight for the podium and for the midfield battle, and just in general a very good solid Moto 3 Grand Prix and the Grand Prix of Indonesia. We'll start off first as well discussing the fact that Diogo Moreira was, for me, going to be probably on the podium. I picked him already for being on the podium, but unfortunately in the warm-up having issues with starting the motorcycle and a few technical issues, couldn't even start from his career best qualifying and couldn't make a decent start for the race, so unfortunately he did end up dropping out. But let's discuss the podium anyway, and we'll discuss the crashes and non-finishes in a moment's time. So as mentioned already, Dennis Foggia with the victory, absolutely dominant. Ethan Guevara looked like he was going to give it to Dennis Foggia at a few points, but unfortunately himself and his teammate Sergio Garcia both messing around and just chopping and changing positions. Thankfully they're changing the same colour paint, but still, two gas riders should have worked together to chase down Dennis Foggia, and they didn't. They wasted time and let Foggia get to the lead and just churn out massively fast lap times. But unfortunately for one of the gas riders, Sergio Garcia missed out on the podium to the pole setter Carlos Tatai. And I think it's been a long time coming for Tatai, of course the former Red Bull Rookies Cup winner. I expected more from Carlos Tatai, but now looks to be getting into his own on board the CF Moto Racing Brustal GP team. So Carlos Tatai's first podium of Moto 3 and his first podium here in the very first debut of the Grand Prix of Indonesia, so pretty good for the young Spaniard. So as mentioned already, Sergio Garcia did miss out on the podium in 4th position. Denis Onchu, Xavi Artigas and Jaume Masia all had a thrilling battle. In fact, move that down the list from Jaume Masia to Ilia Bartolini, to Matteo Bertelli, Mario Aggi was involved with that, Yumi Sasaki, Adrian Fernandez, some parts of that, Alberto Sora, Andrea Mino. They were all fighting within this bunch or pack in the middle. I think even Kaito Toba was in there at one point as well. It might be just up to about Tatsuki Suzuki on board the Leopard Racing Honda, but it was a thrilling battle in the middle. It seemed to be a bit of one of those races where some riders would yo-yo backwards and forth, especially Sergio Garcia and Andrea Mino did towards the end of the Grand Prix, where they'd be fighting, having a great battle, and then forcing to the issue and then going backwards and backwards. But it was a very, very interesting race, it really was. Now Daniel Gardo as well, just to mention, he was actually suffering with a hairline fracture in the tibia, so still hobbling around the track and was still part of this battle is the young rookie, so that for me is pretty impressive, dare I say. Now not everything was great, of course over the weekend we did have a few issues, a few crashes as well, such as Ricky Rossi's pretty bad crash going into turn 2. It was a scary moment for the young Italian, but thankfully he was still able to race, but wasn't able to put it into anything particular special for the Grand Prix. But I think we'll probably move on from Moto 3 now and start discussing Moto 2 and MotoGP, because of course I don't have all the time in the world, so I need to try and balance it out as we go. But unfortunately Yumi Sasaki did take out Andrea Mino on the final lap, I do believe. I think it was the last lap, where Yumi Sasaki clipped the rear of Andrea Mino, and it seems that Mino never has any luck. Bit of fortune in Qatar getting the Grand Prix victory, thought he was going to get a double podium here as well. Unfortunately wasn't the case, as the man on board, the Sterelgard Husqvarna Max Racing team, Yumi Sasaki, gave him a big hit from the rear, so unfortunately Sasaki, Mino out of this race. Now I want to discuss as well the only home GP rider for the weekend, and that was Mario Aggi. All hopes were on the Indonesian, and he did start from 2nd place in the qualifying session, but unfortunately during the Grand Prix he went backwards. He went backwards and it didn't even look like he was going to compete for anything particularly special at the front, but he did get his first points of the season in 14th place no less, so that is 2 points for Mario Aggi. So for Moto 2, it was a change on the fly, but the new race distance at the time was dropped down to 2/3 due to the track conditions. High temperature around 33 degrees was concerning the riders and the teams, so they decided to hurry things along and have a 16-lap race, and it was a pretty solid race and very, very unexpected. The winner of the Indonesian Grand Prix in Moto 2 was Somkhiat Chantra. Now, not only on in the year, Hiroshi Oyama, the owner of the Honda Team Asia, mentioned that he believed that Somkhiat Chantra could fight for not only podiums, but for victories and possibly a championship as well. A lot of people, including myself, thought that was just someone trying to up his rider and trying to give him that confidence to believe in himself. Well, he is serious. Hiroshi Oyama was serious. The former 250cc world champion and the last 250cc world champion to turn to Moto 3 strongly believes in Somkhiat Chantra, and I tell you what, with the performance that Chantra put on today, or yesterday rather, I have a hard time disagreeing with Hiroshi Oyama. Somkhiat Chantra was fantastic, and he probably gave the best post-race conference or media debrief inside the Parc Fermé that I've ever heard. He was so positive, so happy. How could you not like Somkhiat Chantra? It was just fantastic. And of course the Thai rider, not too far away, a lot of Thai fans were actually present in the Indonesian Grand Prix, so a lot of fans for Somkhiat Chantra, and I've got to say I was very impressed with the Thai rider, so great job to Somkhiat Chantra. But now looking at the podium finishes, Celestino Vietti charged his way through, and I've got to be honest with you, I honestly expected Celestino Vietti to be chasing down Somkhiat Chantra and breaking that man's heart, but unfortunately wasn't able to do it. But fortunately, depending on which side of the fence you're on, a 3-second gap to Somkhiat Chantra was pretty much the norm for quite a while. Celestino put in some very fast laps, and you could see it was beginning to get a bit closer from 2.5, 2.7 seconds, and then Chantra would just respond. It was very impressive from Chantra, but also very impressive for the Moto 2 sophomore, Celestino Vietti, doing a fantastic job on the Mooney VR46 racing team. And I've got to be honest with you, leading the World Championship, and he does look like a very, very viable option for a World Championship this season, so fingers crossed for Celestino this year. Once again, Aaron Canet with his bow tie and glasses on the podium, so great job for the young Spaniard. The Calyx seems to be working so well for him compared to the Boscoscura chassis that he has been using for the past few years. But for Aaron Canet, once again on the podium, we're getting that step closer to a Grand Prix victory for Aaron Canet, and then we'll finally be able to understand why he wears the bow tie and the glasses. We just need to understand why he has so many ridiculous tattoos, because he looks like a human colouring book, but never mind about that right now. Aaron Canet, great job in 3rd position. Sam Lowes and Augusto Fernandez had a bit of a battle in the qualifying session, a war of words if you will, but thankfully they weren't able to turn that into an angle or a storyline, and they were still able to both race and be very competitive in the Grand Prix of Indonesia. Sam Lowes finishing 4th and Augusto Fernandez in 5th place. And before we look at their other rides, I want to give a quick shout out to Fermin Aldeguer, the youngest man on the grid in Moto 2, and he seems to be doing extremely well on the conveyor speed up. And bear in mind, that's the Boscosaurus chassis that Aaron Canet got to work last season, but it's still not to the quality of the Calyx, so amazing job for Fermin Aldeguer. Now for me, I'm a big fan of our British rider Jake Dixon, and I gotta be honest with you, I seen the qualifying on Saturday, and I really expected Jake Dixon to be doing something wonderful here in the Grand Prix of Indonesia, at the very least a podium finish. But unfortunately, getting up into the inside of Sam Lowes, finally seeing Jake Dixon up into 2nd position, let's see what the British rider can do, and he crashed out a low side into the right-hander, and that hurt. Turn 10 disaster for Dixon, to be quite honest with you, just 4 laps in. A real big blow. I know at this point there were spots of rain on the camera lenses, probably spots of rain on the visors and on the bike's bubble, but unfortunately Jake Dixon blowing another chance. The last time we seen Jake Dixon really close to a victory or a podium was Le Mans, and of course that was a disaster on the Petronas SRT Calyx, so fingers crossed Jake Dixon can bounce back from this. He took it quite hard, but also he's quite a positive gentleman, so I think he'll bounce back in good style, but really that was a disappointment, not only for myself, not only for him, but probably all of the British fans who are watching even this video right now. Now of course the biggest story from the warm-up and the practice was the fact that Pedro Acosta will receive a long lap penalty during the Grand Prix of Indonesia, which he did take, and I think he dropped from about 9th place down to about 16th if I do recall, which was pretty decent when you think about it, because of course he's not lost a massive amount of time. You're talking like 3 seconds or something, but he's still in the fight for good points. And I gotta say, Pedro Acosta versus Alberto Reinas was a battle that I didn't see coming, but my god, that was awesome towards the end of the Grand Prix. Alberto Reinas chucking up the inside, Acosta being aggressive with Alberto Reinas, it was fantastic. The two Spaniards were really going for it. But compared to the Qatar race, I am beginning to hear a lot of people kind of, letting off with the Pedro Acosta greatest man in the world sort of thing. It's kind of cooling down ever so slightly. We know Acosta's amazing, but people aren't going on about him every single time Moto2 comes up, and for good reason, because there are so many great riders in Moto2, and the podium just shows that. Even the likes of now Idemitsu Honda rider Sonket Chantra getting up there and fighting it out. Ayagura, who had a brilliant race from 20th on the grid, I do believe, all the way up to 6th. Brilliant stuff. There's a lot of talent in Moto2, and it's good that we don't just focus on 1 or 2 riders, we focus on the lot. So amazing job for the riders involved in the Moto2 races. Conditions got a little bit more scary towards the middle of the Grand Prix, but still a very solid Grand Prix. Just to mention a few minor disappointments for me in this particular Grand Prix, we're looking at the likes of Filip Salac and Lorenzo Dalla Porta still not getting it right, same as Nicolo Antonelli. I thought Filip Salac, after doing brilliantly in Qatar, would also be doing brilliantly here, but unfortunately that remained to be seen. Nicolo Antonelli again really struggling in the Moto2 class, which I wasn't expecting, to be quite honest. I did expect a lot more from him. Just to mention as well that Sonket Chantry may not have known was not actually present in the Grand Prix of Qatar, and for good reason. He had a damaged finger, a very bad injury on his finger, and yet still come to the Grand Prix of Indonesia as the Grand Prix winner. But I could go on about the Thai rider all day, but unfortunately we do need to now move across to MotoGP. So let's move across and discuss the big bad category. And let me tell you, what a odd race, what a odd Grand Prix debut for the Grand Prix of Indonesia. Was not expecting it delayed about an hour and a half, that was a shame. But just me sitting at home, I guess, wasn't as bad as the people sitting there and watching the lady do a rain dance. The shaman of Indonesia was trying to be rid of the rain, and you could argue that it actually worked, so fair play to the shaman going out there with a metal tin and her incense sticks just banging around to try and stop the rain. Whether she was the reason it stopped or Fabio Quartararo with his little dinner plate or whatever it was he was whacking in the pits, we got a race, and it was a great race. And I've got to say, the biggest thing to take away from this Grand Prix was how good the track handled the wet. Lap times were roughly 7 seconds slower than the actual dry conditions, which is quite incredible when you think about it. Most tracks will lose 10 to 15 seconds. This one, 7 seconds, and maybe even 6.5 seconds on some particular laps. The lean angles they were getting in this track as well was extremely impressive when it was completely sodden. Very impressive. And now some parts of the track was very damp. Jorge Martin was caught out in the early stages of the Grand Prix due to a very deep wet patch, and the same can be said for Pecco Bagnaia, who also slipped on the same part, but Pecco was able to stay on board, and Jorge Martin unfortunately wasn't able to acquire a single point in 2 races, so bad start for the young Spaniard. Paul Espargaro and Enea Bastianini, as well as Jorge Martin, all had moments without the Grand Prix. In fact, pretty much 90% of the riders had moments, but a few noticeable ones, especially like Paul Espargaro going into the final corner on the back straight, touching the white line and just being launched into the scenery almost. He barely hung on, and it was very impressive. But let's just start discussing then the Grand Prix winner, the podium, and just the general race in itself. So first and foremost, Miguel Oliveira, absolutely superb in the wet. Not who I expected to be dominating this Grand Prix, let me tell you. Thriller Miller was coming through with a very determined look. Passed up the inside of Fabio, who got the whole shot, passed up the inside of Miguel Oliveira, and started churning up the lap times. I was like, great job, Jack Miller, Thriller Miller to take the victory. But Miguel Oliveira did not let him go. At any point did Miguel Oliveira let Jack Miller get away. And he continued to push him and push him and push him until he decided, you know what, I'm going to go for it. Chucks in the low 137s, maybe I think it was a high 137, and just absolutely charged for the finish. 2 seconds Miguel Oliveira cleared away from the pack, if not even more. 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds at one point. Dominant. Absolutely brilliant for Oliveira. A few days ago I watched an interview with Miguel Oliveira, and he was saying that he feels that Pecco Bagnaia, Fabio Quartararo, Joan Mir, a few more riders are all taking the spotlight of MotoGP. And he feels that he deserves to be in that conversation. I would have agreed with him until halfway through last season, where he'd begun to really struggle. But this is coming from Miguel Oliveira's mouth himself, and if he believes he is one of the best in MotoGP, then he's put it on display here in Indonesia. Amazing performance from Miguel Oliveira. We all know how great Oliveira is, but if he can be consistent and stay positive and not have any more laxes in the middle of the Grand Prix or middle of the season where things go a little bit hectic and a bit haywire, we could be seeing Miguel Oliveira as a world champion either this year or a few years' time. Not entirely sure, but I loved Miguel Oliveira's positivity, I loved his determination and his pride in himself. So we'll see what the Portuguese rider can do. But amazing job here in Indonesia. But we'll move on to the rest of the Grand Prix and the rest of the riders for now. Fabio Quartararo usually struggles in the wet, and I seen him get to the front to take the whole shot, and it looked like, oh my god, Fabio could get away with this, and then I realised it's a wet race. Fabio's going to go backwards, he's probably going to finish up in about 10th place. And that happened. Fabio started to go backwards, getting overtaken from Miller, getting overtaken from Oliveira, and just starting to go backwards and backwards. Alex Rins was there, I think up to Joan Mir, so Fabio probably dropped around 5th position. And then all of a sudden, a resurgence from Fabio, midway through the track, just starting to pick up more and more speed, getting more faster lap times in, pushing Jack Miller, pursuing Johan Zarco, pursuing Alex Rins, getting through on them all. It was quite incredible. Alex Rins was very competitive as well throughout the Grand Prix, but to that point it was going to be possibly an Oliveira, Miller, Zarco Grand Prix podium, possibly Alex Rins, depending on the situation. But it was a very fascinating race, and it was really hotting up in the middle parts of the races, and I was getting rather excited. I was really beginning to enjoy it, and unfortunately the shortened distance as well because of the race and the delay, we did see a pretty solid race nonetheless. But Fabio falling backwards and then fighting through with a resurgence and finishing in 2nd place. Incredible job for the Frenchman. And of course another Frenchman on the podium, Johan Zarco, kind of similar, fell backwards a little bit and then started pushing through, and it was rather competitive. But one thing that I was let down with Zarco is he couldn't overtake. He was able to get the speed, he was able to get the job close enough to be done, but it was never done, and he couldn't get past Jack Miller, and I think all that time he lost fighting Jack Miller was the reason why Quartararo got ahead of his compatriot. And I think we could have seen a bit more of a battle between Zarco and Quartararo, but wasn't able to be seen. Now, a few things to finally mention. I want to give a shout out to Darren Binder, the top rookie and quite honestly the best rookie in MotoGP in Indonesia. He was fantastic on board that Yamaha. It seems to be the Yamaha does pretty well in the wet now, it's been up and down over the years. The Yamaha does well in the wet, the Yamaha does bad in the wet, the Yamaha does good in the wet, then it does bad in the wet. You get the trend. But at the minute in this track, they look great. Darren Binder was battling with some incredibly fast riders, from his big brother Brad Binder, from Aleix Espargaro, podium finisher in Silverstone last season, the beast Enea Bastianini, Paul Espargaro, Alex Marquez, and I think even Luca Marini was in there as well, and even Pecco Bagnaia featured in that battle at some points. And Darren Binder, ahead of them all except Aleix and Brad Binder. And he was actually ahead of them going into the penultimate corner, but big brother Brad gave him a bit of a shove up the inside and then took the top points positions that were available at that time, and that was 8th position. But that midfield battle was probably the best part of the Grand Prix. It was absolutely fantastic. If you get a chance to watch that, and I hope MotoGP delivers some more angles from that particular race, I hope so, because it was fantastic. It was like a Moto3 race, but with big MotoGP machines. It was unbelievable. Really good stuff. But speaking of Brad Binder, I didn't know this until the end of the Grand Prix. My friend Hades told me about it. That Brad Binder's ride height didn't work. It malfunctioned throughout the race, and he was racing with the bikes in the completely wrong spot, which is absolutely bizarre when you think about it. So if the ride height has been engaged, he is literally salvaging it from the worst possible situation, being a completely unrideable motorcycle in probably some corners, and getting it in 8th place. We are looking at some very impressive Red Bull KTM factory racing bikes there. Brad Binder and Miguel Oliveira could definitely be winning more Grand Prix this season, and you know what? I hope so for the Austrian factory, because great riders and a great team. So a few more interesting spots for you before we end this video as Pecco Bagnaia, the World Championship favourite for many, World Championship favourite of mine going into the season. only 15th spot in Indonesia, which results in just one single point in 2 Grand Prix. That's a possible 49 points that he's missing out on. Bad stuff for Pecco Bagnaia, and he's not really that comfortable on that Ducati right now. His main complaints was they were constantly changing things with the bikes and he couldn't find anything to really hold on to. So his confidence upon the brakes, which he was dominant on last season, is not there at the minute. And struggling to finish in the points with Pecco here in Indonesia, is that a sign of bad things to come? Or is it just one of those calm before the storm things? One of the biggest stories, apart from the Indonesian GP itself, was of course Marquez's many crashes over the weekend, from practice to the warm-up, crash upon crash. 4 crashes in total this weekend in the Grand Prix of Indonesia, and of course the final blow for the 28-year-old Spaniard was the massive crash, the massive monumental high side that rendered him out of action and unfit for the Indonesian Grand Prix. I don't know what it is with Marquez and that Honda, it just doesn't seem to be working, but I guess I'm going to ask you guys, do you think Marquez can bounce back from this? Do you think he's going to come back and sort of struggle again a little bit and come back with a bang, or how do you think it's going to go? Let me know in the comment section down below, guys, because of course, scary times for the Spaniard, scary times for the 8 times world champion. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below, and of course if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comment section down below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next video. Ciao for now. Oh hi, didn't quite see you there. Good to see you're still here. If this video didn't quite set your appetite, then why not watch some more DrAce content by clicking the video shown on screen now. Furthermore, if you would like to follow me on social media, you can do so now with the links down in the description. Consider subscribing so you don't miss a single DrAce video.